On this Sunday night, Ida bashes Louisiana. Hurricane winds reach 240 kilometers an hour.
This is a major storm that's going to test us in ways that we've not been tested before.
In a state that's had to bear its share of storms, America's new adversary in Afghanistan. The U.S. launches another drone strike on ISIS-K, while NATO allies negotiate with another dangerous enemy to get people out of the country. More protests meet the Liberal leader, but Justin Trudeau is defiant on the campaign.
Canadians won't back down, and neither will I.
You got spunk.
And the man who played Mr. Grant wasn't just an actor. Ed Asner was an activist, too.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. A flood of memories has come rushing back to the U.S. Gulf Coast. Hurricane Ida, a powerful Category 4 storm, made landfall in Louisiana this morning on the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. The winds were strong, reaching 240 kilometers an hour, and power has been knocked out in parts of the state. Some residents who've been there before are getting out. But as Jennifer Johnson reports, some are risking the dangerous storm and staying put.
With powerful winds and heavy rains, Hurricane Ida is battering Louisiana's coastline.
Oh my God! Yo!
16 years to the day Hurricane Katrina destroyed the region. Louisiana still hasn't recovered from 5 storms that hit in 2020. But widespread destruction is expected again from this hurricane.
Any one of those areas, you can get that catastrophic damaging wind, structural damage, power outages, trees down, significant hazards on the road.
Ida is expected to bring at least 50 centimeters of rain and a storm surge of 4 meters. Floodgates put into place after Katrina have been closed to try and protect the area south of New Orleans. Modeling shows levees are expected to hold. In other places, the city distributed sandbags for residents to guard against rising waters.
There's been about a $14 billion investment since Hurricane Katrina over the last 16 years.
But in less populated, low-lying areas, some levees remain unfinished. Business owners are hoping for the best.
So I've been 2 days now boarding up a lot of buildings, getting ready, crossing our fingers.
Hundreds of thousands of residents who survived Katrina didn't want to see history repeat itself, so they hit the roadways and got out.
We decided to take off, because just like with Hurricane Katrina, we're not trying to be here for the disaster. So we ain't taking no chances, we leaving.
But many in New Orleans and surrounding St. Charles Parish decided to ride out the storm, even though the area is under a mandatory evacuation order after it was all but destroyed by Katrina.
Most of my neighbors are staying. I'm staying.
Ida is hitting a region already reeling from a COVID-19 resurgence. With low vaccination rates, New Orleans area hospitals are almost all filled up, with little to no room for people who may be injured by this hurricane.
And to the people of the Gulf Coast, I want you to know that we're praying for the best and planning prepared for the worst.
Ida is one of the most powerful storms to ever hit the U.S., striking a region all too familiar with devastating hurricanes. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Let's bring in global meteorologist Yvonne Schell. Yvonne, this is one of the most powerful storms to hit Louisiana. How did it get so dangerous?
Robin, it strengthened overnight, and with it we saw those winds anywhere between 100 kilometers per hour and then doubling closer to 200 kilometers per hour as it strengthened and moved along some of the warmest waters, and these are the northern half of the Gulf of Mexico. A great shot that was captured from the space station. This was sent out on Twitter from Hurricane Ida, and now we're going to continue to watch it. We've had those winds exceed anywhere between 240 and gusts of up to 300 kilometers per hour. Category 4, and it's still going to work in a northwesterly direction. We'll still see those gusts over 200 kilometers per hour rather. And then as it weakens, we are going to see the biggest threat, especially the storm surge, anywhere between 12 and up to 16 feet. And additional rainfall amounts, Robin, will range between 50 to 100 millimeters.
All right. Thanks, Yvonne. The other big weather threat is Hurricane Nora, which has now weakened to a tropical storm. Nora is battering Mexico. The storm has caused flooding and landslides, turning soldiers into rescuers. Many people living in the area are struggling to get out. Nora has hit the popular tourist areas of Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan. At least 2 people have been injured, and 6 fishermen are reported missing at sea. The remnants of the hurricane are tracking north. The security situation in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, remains extremely tense tonight. Earlier today, the U.S. military carried out a drone strike against what the Pentagon says was a vehicle carrying suicide bombers. This is what remains of the vehicle after the strike. It's the second coordinated attack by the United States following last week's suicide bombing at Kabul's airport that killed at least 169 Afghans, in addition to 13 U.S. military service members. Today, U.S. President Joe Biden and his wife Jill traveled to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware to pay their respects to those fallen service members. They ranged in age from 20 to 31. Biden met in private with their families. He's the 4th U.S. president to bear witness to a military ceremony honoring soldiers killed in Afghanistan. At Kabul's international airport, U.S. military planes continue to fly in and out of the country. These are some of the last flights ferrying people out of Afghanistan ahead of a Tuesday deadline to pull American troops out. The U.S. State Department released a statement signed by nearly 100 countries saying the U.S. had received assurances from the Taliban that people with travel documents would still be able to leave. Turning to the election, the leaders are setting their sights on Quebec, hoping to win over voters in a province critical to the campaign. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole got down to business, pledging support for Canadian entrepreneurs. But as Michael Couture reports, some analysts say his plan has gaps.
We're also going to have the Rebuild Main Street.
Erin O'Toole is trying to frame his party as the only one standing up for small and medium-sized businesses. The Quebec bowling alley used as a backdrop was closed during the pandemic, and the owner took on significant debt. The Conservative leader believes his plan to rebuild Canada's main streets will be a strike with voters.
We will introduce an all-new Rebuild Main Street tax credit.
It's a 25% tax credit on amounts up to $100,000 for anyone that personally invests in a small business. The Tories also plan to offer a more generous version of the Canada Emergency Business Account loan, including interest-free loans of up to $200,000.
We will make up to 25% of these loans forgivable for small businesses. This will help struggling businesses get back on their feet and create jobs.
The Canadian Federation of Independent Business applauds the plan, pointing out more than 800,000 Canadian small businesses use the pandemic emergency business loan.
The average small business has $160,000 in fresh COVID-related debt. And that's going to mean that it's an anvil around their necks as they reopen.
One thing this plan doesn't cover is the growing number of home-run online businesses, or so-called micro-sized businesses.
Those programs remain locked down and only available to mature businesses that have been around forever. The Conservative platform doesn't speak to changing any of the eligibility requirements, neither does the NDP platform.
Pressed on why micro-sized businesses aren't part of this plan, O'Toole sidestepped the question.
We want people working in all sectors of the economy and in all regions of the country, and we're going to work relentlessly to achieve that.
Dan Kelly says the CFIB is pushing all parties to include small and micro-sized businesses in these platform proposals so that they too can get help as they try to get through the pandemic. Robin.
Michael Couture in Trois-Rivières, Quebec. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau has just arrived in Montreal after another volatile campaign stop in Ontario this morning. Trudeau was making his first big climate announcement of the campaign, but once again it was delayed and interrupted by crowds of angry protesters. David Akin is following the Liberal campaign. David.
Well, Robin, week 3 on the campaign with the Liberals began pretty much as week 2 ended, with a horde of loud, foul-mouthed protesters trying to disrupt the campaign.
Freedom! Freedom! Freedom!
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is the lightning rod of their hatred.
He is a coward.
Trudeau was the target of obscene chants from a crowd where many brought young children.
Shame on you!
Police were forced to physically remove one woman, though neither she nor anyone else was arrested. But But unlike Friday's event in Bolton, Ontario, when a similar group of protesters forced the Liberals to cancel their plans out of concerns for the safety of the participants, the Liberals carried on with Sunday's event.
The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
Thank you, Brian.
Even as protesters tried to shout him down.
Right alongside you.
And yet, asked if his team will change the way they campaign to reduce the chance of his security detail or others from getting hurt, Trudeau seemed defiant.
Canadians won't back down, and neither will I.
The protest overshadowed Trudeau's announcement, this one on climate change. There were no new commitments or promises, just a restating of initiatives announced in the 21-21 budget or elsewhere.
Green jobs are good jobs and good careers. That's why a Liberal government will keep investing in clean industries that power our future, grow our economy, and protect our environment.
Now, looking ahead to the week, the big focus is going to be on Quebec. All the party leaders are there today for a media event tonight, and then they'll be back on Thursday for the first debate, a French language leaders debate. Now, right now, Liberals are still leading in Quebec. That hasn't changed, even as they've fallen behind the Conservatives in Ontario and in BC. And historically, if Quebecers are going to start shifting their votes, it starts to happen after those debates. Robin?
David Akin in Kitchener, Ontario. Thanks, David. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh needs the Quebec vote if he wants to recreate the so-called Orange Crush of 2011, when New Democrats gained 59 seats. Today, Singh campaigned alongside Ruth Ellen Brasseau. A decade ago, she was the party's success story, starting out as a paper candidate and then rising up the party ranks. She was re-elected in 2015, but lost her seat to the Bloc Québécois in the last election. Singh hopes Brasseau will help revive his party's fortunes in this part of Canada.
There's the expression, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. We've always had Liberal or Conservative governments, and I think this time around people are really excited and they're going to be more open to an NDP government.
Once again, the NDP leader was asked if he'd prop up the Conservatives or Liberals in a minority scenario. He wouldn't speculate, saying his goal is to win the election. Manitoba Premier Brian Palliser says he will officially step down on Wednesday. Earlier this month, Palliser, Premier since 2016, announced he would not seek re-election. He says he's leaving his post now to avoid any perception that he's influencing the leadership vote. Progressive Conservatives will pick a new leader October 30th. The party will choose an interim leader this week. The next provincial election is slated for 2023. Palliser says he will continue to sit as a member of the legislature for the time being. Still to come, he played a gruff character in Up and won in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, remembering Ed Asner. There is trepidation across the country as parents prepare to send their children back to school for in-person learning. Canada's overall vaccination rate is inching upward, but there are still thousands of people who are not vaccinated. The Delta cases keep rising, and children can't be vaccinated yet. Here's Global's Montana Getty.
Like students all across the country, Jack Ham and his brother Elliot are getting ready to return to their Edmonton school with few regulations and no vaccinations. Their mom, Lisa, says she's concerned but has faith in teachers and the school system to keep children safe.
I just think that there's a bit more of a loose feeling this year, like a little bit less fear and just more preparation, more readiness, and a bit more of an ease.
Adults are getting vaccinated, and that's an important step towards ending the spread of COVID-19. But that doesn't mean kids are in the clear, according to Nazim Mahajareen, an epidemiologist at the University of Saskatchewan.
If you look back to a year ago, end of August 2020, we were looking at numbers that were probably in the order of about 40 times fewer than what we are seeing this week.
While BC, Manitoba, Quebec, and Ontario all have mask rules for certain grades, BC's education minister says what's different now is that majority of adults, including teachers, are vaccinated this year compared to last year when school started months before the vaccine rollout even began.
We are not in the same situation this year as we were heading into last September, because we now have safe and effective vaccines that we know protect us from COVID.
But no province, including BC, has an across-the-board mask mandate for children, which is a big challenge entering the new school year, says Mahajareen.
So I think we have to really do all of the things we were doing a year ago in terms of keeping our kids safe in school. In fact, I would say we need to do even better.
For parents like Christy Edwardson, a mother of 4 from Edmonton, all these rules are leaving them feeling burnt out.
Just trying to keep up with the updates and trying to prepare my children mentally of what's going to be happening. It's hard some days. We all have good days and bad days, but I'm tired.
Back at the park, Jack and Elliot and their mom agree. Everyone wants to get back to normal, but the key is doing it safely.
It's disappointing that we're there again, but I think it is the right call to take like masking precautions and sanitizing and doing all that.
Montana Getty, Global News, Saskatoon.
Still ahead, a landmark ruling puts a spotlight on systemic racism in Nova Scotia's justice system. In Nova Scotia, a new ruling by the province's highest court is being called an unequivocal win for the Black community. Nova Scotia's Court of Appeal has ruled trial judges must consider historical disadvantages and systemic racism facing Black people during sentencing. And as Graham Benjamin reports, the landmark decision is just the first step.
There was reason to celebrate at the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute after Nova Scotia's highest court handed down a major legal victory.
I can say unequivocally that this is a win for African Nova Scotians.
Last week, the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal ruled that judges must consider the impact of systemic racism at all stages of the sentencing process. The ruling involved the case of Rakeem Rayson Anderson, a Black man who was found guilty on 5 firearm-related charges in June 2019. He was essentially handed a community-based sentence based in large part to the information that the judge received through something called an impact of race and cultural assessment, also known as an IRCA.
It became about how we sentence African Nova Scotians generally and how we're going to begin to tackle the issue of overrepresentation of African Nova Scotians in the justice system.
IRCAs were created right here in Nova Scotia by local social worker and sociologist Robert Wright, who's dedicated his career to lasting systemic change through social policy advocacy.
The decision came out, I printed it, and I went for a walk and sat under a tree and read it, and had a very emotional experience.
Rakeem Anderson and his legal team declined to comment, saying that he's looking to leave this matter in the past. For their part, local advocates say the significance of this decision should not be understated. For years, Dorico Simons with Game Changers 902 has been pushing for reform in the province's criminal justice system. He's calling this a good first step.
The next step is how then can we treat and support and help a Black person who has had a lifetime of inequity.
And Wright doesn't want IRCAs limited just to Nova Scotia. He wants them implemented across the country.
Making that tool and the Anderson decision live from sea to sea to sea.
Graham Benjamin, Global News, Halifax.
Up next, how to turn that pandemic frown upside down. Tonight, Ed Asner is being remembered as one of the greats. The world has lost a personality with all sorts of personality.
You want to go out on a date with me? You're out of your mind.
Asner is perhaps best known for playing Lou Grant on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He won 5 Emmys as the crusty but lovable newsman. Off-screen, he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1981 to 1985, but was accused of politicizing the union. He didn't shy away from politics, critical of President Ronald Reagan's administration in the 1980s, particularly on America's involvement in El Salvador's civil war. Asner had more than 300 acting credits to his name and worked well into his 70s and 80s, more recently in the animated movie Up.
So long, boys! I'll send you a postcard from Paradise Falls.
Asner died in Los Angeles, surrounded by his family. He was married twice and had 4 children. Ed Asner dead at 91 years old. There's no question COVID-19 has disrupted our lives. Now, a Canadian survey is offering insight on whether our social connections have held up or not during the pandemic. That can have an effect on our happiness. And as Melanie Zettler found out, one way to keep smiling, talk to strangers.
Good afternoon. You a Sagittarian?
No, I'm a Capricornus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. What's in your cup, sir?
Coffee.
Coffee. Good choice.
People who greet strangers at least once weekly were 3 times more likely to be happy than those who did not, according to a new survey conducted by the GenWell Project in partnership with the University of Victoria.
In looking at the relationship between happiness and talking to strangers, one way to interpret it is you could say a characteristic of happy people is they talk to strangers. So we don't know necessarily which direction the causation goes, but we do see this pattern in our data that when you talk to strangers, you also report higher happiness.
The not so happy findings, 60% of participants reported feeling lonely many times a week. Almost half, 46%, report they felt lonely every day. The rate of loneliness across all generations is above 45%.
On the more hopeful side, it should come as no surprise that the people surveyed crave human connection. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Melanie.
Those around you are looking for ways to connect. We found that 4 in 10 Canadians wanted to spend more time with others. They wanted to have more friends, whether that's virtually or whether that's outside on a walk where, risk of COVID transmission is very low.
Canadians who spend at least 5 hours per week socializing with family were 2.14 times more likely to be happy, with more than 90% of Canadians indicating that they want to spend at least 1 hour with their friends and family per week. And after 18 months of following public health guidelines, your socialization muscle might need to be exercised.
Dexter, are you cranky? You look great. You look very summery.
So do you.
Melanie Zettler, Global News.
Well, we hope you had a happy weekend, and that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Watch for Saskatchewan. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back here tomorrow. Until then, have a happy night.